lovelies, it's Adele here from Crow with the Flow. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to take you through how to level up your amigurumi with color changes and to make them look super slick. One of the most visually stunning things you can do with most amigurumi patterns is to add in a bunch of color changes. You can make it rainbow, you can make it stripy. What I'm going to show you today is how to create those color changes that don't have a jog so that they're one full circle that look like this. So the first thing you want to do is decide what yarn you're going to use. I personally have just gone with colors that I think work well together because for me, color is super important, and then I have to obviously make sure that they're all the same weight. I'm definitely not loyal to one particular brand on this. For me, it's all about how they work together. Are they the same weight? Do the colors work? You can very much do this with any weight of yarn. If you want to make it in plush yarn, go for your life. If you want to make it in blanket yarn or like super thin embroidery thread, as long as they're all the same weight, that's what matters. And as long as the colors work. Otherwise, choose whatever works for you. These ones are cotton in a size 4 or worsted weight or 10 ply, depending on where you're from. First thing to do is to make sure that your yarn is really well organized, especially if you're using lots of colors like in a rainbow. I tend to just put all my yarns in a box and that makes it easier. To start this process off, you do the first row as you normally would, but then into that first stitch that you've created, you do a slip stitch, fastening off that first color that you use. You can see here, this just creates a circle of yellow. So at this point in time, it doesn't matter where you attach the next color, just attach it as you see here. So after you've attached the second color, you work in the next stitch and you just follow the instructions for the second row of your pattern. And for this pattern, that's just increase in each stitch around. And what's really important to note is that you are working into that slip stitch that you use to join the first row together. So for this example, I'm using an increase, and you just need to make sure that the tails are pulled a little bit tight as you're doing it. Then the next thing to be aware of is you don't want to work into that same stitch where the slip stitch is. You want to work in the next stitch because we don't want to add more stitches than what it says in the pattern. And you want to work over those tails for at least a couple of stitches and you pull them tight to make sure that you're creating as seamless a transition as possible. Then as you come up to the end of this row, you work into the same stitch that you attached that new color. So you do that as the final stitch, and then we're working another slip stitch into the first orange stitch that you created. And fasten off the second color. From this point on, I tend to alternate whether I'm attaching the new colour before or after the join, just so that it creates a bit more of a balanced effect with the colour changes. So to show you another example of this colour change, I'm using the red, and this will be the single stitch increase row. You can see here again, I'm working over the tails and keeping them quite tight. But I'll meet you up again at the end of this row. And now I'm coming to the end of the red row. I am again working into that slip stitch and keeping the tails quite tight. I'm finishing off in the stitch where we initially attached the red yarn, working those final stitches, and then I do the slip stitch in that first stitch once again. And you can see as I'm showing here that the red goes around for the full circle. Another thing that I'm super finicky about is where my increases fall. And this is really easy to adjust when you're changing yarn for each row. As you can see here, I'm attaching the yarn in between the increases from the previous row. And that will mean that the increase with the blue yarn will be in between the increases that you've made already for the purple yarn. It's a small and finicky thing. You don't strictly have to do it, but for me, it creates a more rounded creation as opposed to a hexagonal creation, and it means that the increases don't line up. It just makes it slightly less obvious where your increases are, which I personally like.
I've used the white arrows to show you here where the purple increases are, and the pink arrow shows you where the blue increase is in between the two. Okay, I think you get the point here, but let me show you another example using decreases. Here I'm using my thumbs to show you where the decreases are for the yellow yarn, and then I'm counting back to determine where I attach the next colour. Again, so the orange yarn puts the decrease in between the decreases of the yellow. And here's that decrease. And once again, just in case you weren't 100% sure of the technique, you work into that slip stitch from the previous row, making sure that you're then working into the next stitches. For this pattern, it's a decrease, so you can see how I do that here. And then you want to make sure that you work into that same stitch that you attached the colour that you're working with. For this, it's orange, and then slip stitch through the top. That will create the full round of colour so that there's no jog. And then you're really just continuing the pattern of colours for all of the elements, or as many of the elements as you want. The final little bit of yarn nerdery that I try really hard to do is when I'm sewing pieces together, trying to line up the colours. It just makes my brain happy when you can get the yellow lining up with the yellow, the green with the green, the blue with the blue. So this one isn't 100%, but I think we're getting pretty close.
I've just finished sewing all of the pieces together. You can see here we have a pretty stunning rainbow bird. Hopefully those little pointers have given you the confidence to create a striped or rainbow creation out of whichever pattern you happen to use. I'm pretty happy with it. This is from the Galah and Black Cockatoo pattern, which I've got coming out very soon, which will include the instructions around these crocheted eyes. I'd love for you to let me know in the comments if you use this technique and what you're creating. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you again soon.